Hi, I'm State Representative Beau LaFave. It is such an honor to be able to talk with you guys in Kingsford Middle School, the same middle school that I went to, as talk about my job as your state representative. John, we've got some questions, don't we?
Yes, we do, Representative. We're going to dive right in. First off, what is the name of your career?
So I am a state representative in the Michigan House of Representatives. And basically what that means is that I write laws with the help of the Michigan Senate, and we send them over to the governor's office where she signs them into law.
What pathway does that career fall into?
So with my job, it's a public service job, which it's in government. And so to get my job, you need to talk to a lot of people, and you need to get elected by your friends, your neighbors, your family. And in my position, it's 3 counties, which is all of Dickinson, Menominee, and Delta County.
And what kind of education is needed to do your job?
Well, technically, none. But it's very helpful to, number one, finish middle school, finish high school. And a lot of my colleagues, including myself, did go off to a university or off to a community college. I went to Bay College, and I went to Michigan State University. I was attempting to go through law school, but my job got in the way of that.
Do you use math or science or social studies in your job?
So my job, a lot of what I do is social sciences, communicating with others, talking with my friends in the Michigan House, what I call colleagues, and discussing important issues. Those important issues might be that we don't have enough funding for schools in the Upper Peninsula, and trying to explain to them why we need more help. And so social sciences is a big part of my job, but we also do things like actually fund schools. And to do that, math is involved. And from a science perspective, yeah, we need to understand, how diseases spread, how those type of things work from a science perspective, and what we can do to help people. So absolutely all of those fields are integral to my job.
What are some jobs that are similar to the job you have right now?
So similar to my job would be like a school board or a city council. In addition to that, at a bigger level would be like Congress. And fundamentally what my job is making the rules and negotiating and working with people to set what those rules are. And then in the executive branch, think of your principal or the mayor or the president. Their job is to enforce the rules. So principally my job is to make the rules. And then, we pass it off to a different branch of government to enforce the rules, or the court system to actually adjudicate those rules. Did you break the rule or didn't you break the rule? It's not my job to determine that after we already wrote it. That's the job of the judiciary, think of judges and administrators.
Did your life goals when you were younger affect the job that you're doing right now?
Well, some of my colleagues still call me younger right now. I'm 28 years old, and for somebody that's in middle school, that sounds pretty old. But I'm still learning. I'm still working every day on achieving my life goals. But when I was younger, I wanted to do a lot of things. I wanted to be a chef. I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to, principally, I wanted to be a lawyer. And I still want to be a lawyer someday. But my pathway to becoming a lawyer is something other than the traditional way. I started my first year in law school, and I saw a position opened up in the Michigan House of Representatives. I thought I could be helpful. Ed McBroom was the state representative. Now he's our state senator, but back when I started running, he was a term-limited member of the House. And so I saw he was leaving us through no fault of his own. And I wanted to continue the good work for the people of the Upper Peninsula that my predecessor did. And that put my education on hold. But in my job, I'm limited to 6 years maximum. And now I can say I'm limited to 6 years because I did get that third election. So There are a lot of people that are happy that I'm a state representative. There are a lot of people that are upset that I'm a state representative. But either way you feel on that one, I'm done. In 2 years, I'm out of this job. And somebody like you is going to be picking up my seat. So stay in school, keep those career goals ahead of you, because this job is certainly not available for somebody forever. 6 years sounds like a long time, but it feels really short when you're doing the job.
You mentioned friends, you mentioned family. How did they help you along the way?
So a lot of what I had to do to get this job was knock on a lot of doors of random houses and random cul-de-sacs or streets in cities that I've visited a handful of times prior to running for office. I grew up in Kingsford, and I spent a lot of time in Iron Mountain, Kingsford, Norway. Not as much time in Gladstone, not as much time in Stevenson and Menominee, but my friends and family were able to help by knocking on some of those doors, because there's about 50,000 doors in my area that I work for with 90,000 people. So there's a lot of doors. They helped out a lot by knocking on those.
How did you feel when you got your first job? Were you scared? Were you under pressure?
So my first job was technically in my parents' house, or my parents' business, where when I was probably 12. So I started out working young, but answering phone calls for customers who are spending a lot of money to build a house is nerve-wracking, and so certainly it was. And then when I got to this job, I had an amazing amount of pressure put on me because my salary came from the people of the state of Michigan, who put in 80-hour work weeks and then paid taxes to get my job, so I can have my job and get paid for it. So that was a lot of weight on my shoulders. Yeah, I was a little bit nervous. I won't lie to anybody about that.
Did you take any courses when you were in high school, representative, that were helpful for the job you have right now?
I think the most useful courses that I took in high school would probably, maybe not useful, but entertaining and helpful in this job, were things like AP US history. Learning about the past, learning about how our society came to be, and what our founding generation and everybody after it has done in this country, kind of grounded me a little bit in where we are. So I love history. I hate to say what my favorite subject is with a teacher listening, but it's got to be history.
What do you like best about the job that you have right now?
That's a good question. My favorite thing about my job has got to be the fact that I don't have to know all of the answers all the time. I have 90,000 people that I work for. Everybody in Dickinson, Delta, and Menominee counties. Think your friends, think your family, your neighbors, your teachers. I work for all of them. And I don't have to be smarter than all of them. It's impossible. But I certainly am not smarter than all of my 90,000 people. I just have to know that I have to listen to them. And I get to use the best ideas of everybody for my job. And it takes a little bit of pressure off. But it means I also need to have an open ear and actually listen. So that's a challenging part of the job, is sometimes I really think I know what needs to be done. And I get stuck in my own ideas. And I just need to remind myself that there are people smarter than me. And it's not because of any fault of my own, but it's just that I'm not an expert in every subject. So I just got to listen. So that's something I try to do more as much as I can.
If there is such a thing as a typical day in your job, what is it like?
Well, there's no typical day, but there is a typical week, I would say. So typical week is on Monday morning, I get up, and I live in Iron Mountain, don't hold it against me, but I get up, I feed the dog, and then we jump in the car and we drive from Iron Mountain to Lansing, which is 428 miles from my house. And then I get up on Tuesday morning, usually around 7, and go into the office where I have committee meetings followed by session, followed by more meetings, followed by more meetings, followed by dinner, followed by bed. And then we do the same thing on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, it's committee meetings, session, less meetings, back in the car with the dog, back to the Upper Peninsula. Friday, Saturday, and usually Monday a little bit is meetings back in the Upper Peninsula.
What do you like least? What things, if you could change, would you change?
Well, if it was physically possible to move the Michigan capital closer to Kingsford and Iron Mountain, I would absolutely love that. But in my job, I would need to convince probably 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and the governor to move the capital. And that's just not going to happen. So the toughest part about my job is that drive, that 7-hour drive from Iron Mountain to Lansing twice a week.
And you just touched on this a little bit, actually, but what are your hours like? Is there much overtime? I know you've been in session all night at the Capitol, and as you mentioned too, you do have to work on weekends.
Yeah, so as far as overtime goes, my job is what's called a salaried position. I get paid, this might sound silly, but I get paid no matter what I do. If I do a terrible job, I get paid. If I do a really good job, I get paid the exact same amount. So in my position, there's no overtime. You know, we get the salary that we get, but we also are expected to be on call 24/7. When this COVID-19 pandemic hit, my office and I had thousands and thousands of phone calls of people who were out of work and needed to be able to pay the bills. So we didn't take time off. We were working 12, 16 hours a day to try to help people because the unemployment office were closed. And so we had to help. And as far as my job in Lansing specifically, sometimes we show up on the floor of the House of Representatives where we do our voting. If you ever watch C-SPAN, you can see the floor of the U.S. House or U.S. Senate. Very similar to that, although we have our own desks, which is nice. But sometimes we show up at 9 in the morning and we don't leave until 11:59 p.m. They use the gavel, which means that it's done, and then we show up back to work 2 minutes later at 12:01 a.m. And we go for another, could be 12 hours, could be 24 hours. So I would certainly say in my job, getting sleep when you get a chance is a good idea.
You were talking about salary. What is the salary for a state representative?
So a state representative gets $72,000 a year, and we also are compensated for the mileage that we do. So as much as I complain about that trip from Iron Mountain to Lansing, I do get paid for that. It's a reimbursement, so you can add a couple $1,000s on top of that.
What other jobs are available in the Michigan House or the Michigan Legislature besides the job of state representative, and there are 109 others in addition to you?
Well, so there's 110 reps, which is my job. There's 38 senators. But holding us up on their shoulders is the thousands of staffers that help us every day, like John. John, you work in the communications department.
Exactly.
And there's dozens of people that work in communications, crafting messaging, helping us communicate in an effective way. We also have our public policy team. They're the ones that look in a deep dive into the nitty-gritty of public policy. Should taxes be here or should they be here? Where exactly is the optimal level for that? In a whole host of other positions.
In your own office?
Yeah, and of course in my own office, I have a chief of staff who's in charge of, well, technically me, she thinks, and I don't disagree with her. She's also in charge of legislation. And then Brady, that's Danielle, and then Brady, he's in charge of working for the 90,000 people. So Danielle kind of does my Lansing help, and Brady does my Upper Peninsula help. So there are thousands of people that work in the Michigan House and Senate that prop us 148 up. And without them, I don't know how we would be effective.
Who do you talk with? Who do you communicate with on a daily basis?
So my colleagues in the House are a lot like your classmates for you. I've got to get along with them, and we've got to work together because I can't do anything alone. That's the one thing I think that's special about my job compared to some other ones is I can't literally almost do anything by myself. I can write a letter. I can talk to people on my own. But if I don't have a majority of my classmates, my colleagues, support of something that I want to do, it doesn't happen. So on a daily basis, I have to foster a friendly relationship with them and just know who they are, what they're interested in, what their goals are, and try to help them get what they want done for the benefit of the people that I work for.
What are you most proud of professionally?
Oh, that's a good question. One of the biggest things that was frustrating to me before I got into office is that it was difficult for high school kids to get an internship at a local business. You had to fill out 30 pages of paperwork to get that. So when I got elected, I took that 30 pages of paperwork and I think we knocked it down to 3.5. And now it's so much easier if you are on a pathway to graduation and you are going to graduate high school if you continue doing the grades that you are. The school is legally required to allow you to get an internship if somebody's offering one to you. So I think that's really important because I want everybody in my area to know they can get a good job in their backyard, working for friends, family, neighbors.
Have you ever run across any kind of dishonesty in this job or another job? And if you did, what did you do about it?
Yeah, dishonesty is unfortunately a part of the job, and not as though it's a desirable or a good thing and not something that I utilize. But there are dishonest people in this world that'll promise you that they will vote to help fund the Upper Peninsula's Pine Mountain ski jump. And then you look at that voting board and there are no. Is it dishonesty or was it a change of heart? Did they change their mind? And sometimes you want to jump to, that person lied to me. It's almost never the case, as they just changed their mind or they had a change of heart. But there is dishonesty, and it's upsetting, but you can't just throw out or cast away someone that lied to you as though they're no longer a useful human being, because everybody makes mistakes and people lie, and it's upsetting, but you need to be able to forgive them and be able to move past it, because otherwise you'll have no friends.
Did you ever have a job where you got a promotion? And if you did, how did you get it?
So in this particular job, I was able to get a committee chairmanship. And I chair the Michigan Committee on Military, Veterans Affairs, and Homeland Security. Now, not everybody would call that a promotion per se, but I did earn the respect of the Speaker of the House to give me that position, as well as I have the most committee assignments in the House of Representatives. So what I had to do for that was basically with my chairmanship, I'm in charge of running the meeting. And what you do in that position is you work with the Republicans and the Democrats, who are equal members of the legislature like I am, the 110 of us. But I'm in charge of that room. I'm in charge of that committee. That means showing respect to everybody that is serving in the committee with me. Because it goes back to fundamentally, if I don't have their support, I can't do anything. And so you can't let that power go to your head. You got to remember that in a representative democracy, if you want anything done, you've got to convince 51% at least that you're right. And you can't be a jerk when you do that.
Do you work at a computer a lot?
Ever since COVID-19 hit, I've worked at a computer much more than I would like to. It used to be that everything was done in Lansing. If you wanted anything done, I get in a car, I drive down here to Lansing, and I shake hands. I hug my colleagues. Well, we aren't doing that anymore. No more hugging and hardly any handshaking. So there's a lot more computer use now. Learning to use Skype, for example, giant pain in the butt sometimes.
One question is your company growing? So is government or the State House growing? And what is the outlook for the future?
Well, fortunately, government isn't growing. We have a big enough government already, and particularly in the Michigan House of Representatives, we are essentially capped at 110. We could constitutionally increase that number, but for the last 50 years, I think we've left it at 110. So there's not going to be any new representatives' seats. But with respect to the people's butts that sit in the seats, those are constantly changing. So in the Michigan House, we have 3 two-year terms. So you can get elected 3 times, as I did, for 2 years each for a cap of 6 years total. After that, I'm gone. I'm never allowed to have this job again by the Constitution that's written right now. Technically, we can change it, but so it's a revolving door of people working hard, knocking on doors, coming into Lansing, working hard, and then going right back home in 2 to 3 to 6 year cycles. So it's not growing. I don't think government needs to grow any bigger. I think it's big enough as it is. We take enough money from the pockets of the citizens. But there are a lot of us, and we're constantly revolving.
The next question is, will your job exist 10 years from now? And the answer is yes, but you're saying it won't be you.
Yeah, it won't be me doing this job in the House 10 years from now. I hope, by all hopes, that the legislature, the people's elected leaders that vote on rules and laws, will always remain. Because if it doesn't, our government has changed fundamentally into a dictatorship or a monarchy or an oligarchy, or what concerns me very much is bureaucrats running everything. Those are unelected officials that got hired to do the work of the government, but don't have any accountability to the people. So my concern is that the elected representatives who work very hard to be in touch with their constituents, the people they work for, will be pushed aside to technocrats or to bureaucrats who were elected, who were hired by politicians, by elected leaders, but then they really run the show. That concerns me. I don't think that's happening. I don't think it's going to happen. Certainly not in 10 years, but always something to be concerned about.
Representative, how does your career affect the life that you live and lead?
It certainly is different than being, with my career, it's very different than being just, I don't want to say a regular citizen, because I am a regular citizen. But with my job does come some sort of, I don't want to say popularity either, but a lot of folks know who I am. I guess I want to say it that way. And for example, I go through the drive-thru at Taco Bell. I love Taco Bell. It's delicious. And half the time, the people there recognize me. And it might be because I go to Taco Bell too much, but at different restaurants as well. And so I never get to be anonymous. You know, if you ever go to a new city and you just are who you are and nobody knows who you are, I don't really get that in my job. Unless I actually leave the state of Michigan, then nobody knows who I am, and it's actually kind of refreshing a little bit sometimes. But
so you probably run into a lot of, can you help me with this issue, or what do you think about this bill I heard about, kind of thing?
Yeah. I a lot of times talking about the people back in district.
Exactly.
Yeah, A lot of times people have troubles that they need help with, getting unemployment, the fact that their car insurance is so expensive. I heard that a lot. And then I paid a car insurance bill and actually looked at it. I said, oh my goodness, everybody's right, it is very expensive. So we worked on fixing that. And for a lot of people now, it's a lot cheaper.
As you progress in your career, looking back, is there anything you might have done differently?
You know, I think that looking back on my last 4 years in office, I think I should have spent a little bit more time getting to know my colleagues, my friends, just a little bit better. And I don't think that I did a poor job at that. I think I did a good job at that. But some of my colleagues are term limited. Some of them attempted to get into higher office and they were not successful. And they're going to be leaving me quicker than I thought they were going to. So I thought I had more time with them. And so not spending that extra 20 minutes at dinner when we could go to restaurants legally, or taking that extra 15 minutes on the phone call, I should have done that a little bit more.
One more question. This is the last question. If you enjoy the job you have right now, but another job came along, it paid more money, but it wasn't as interesting, what would you do?
Well, the tough thing is, in my job, nothing could be more interesting. Sure, I could make a lot more money doing a lot of different things, but nothing is going to be as fun or as interesting as this job. I wake up on a Tuesday morning and I think I'm going to be doing X. I think I'm going to be doing this thing. And I get into work and we're going to work really hard on that thing that I've been thinking about for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or a year. And COVID-19 hits, or there's a budget crisis because something happened, and X goes back onto the table on the back desk, and we work on the pressing thing of the issue. So it's surprising the amount of topics that we have to deal with, from police to schools, criminal law. I mean, speed limits, seatbelt laws. It's a lot of stuff.
Things people deal with every day.
Yeah, and that affect, as like you said, affect everybody. So nothing will be as interesting as this job. I'm sure that when I finally leave my seat, my next job will probably pay more. But I will miss this job, and I wouldn't give it up for the world.
That's all the questions, Representative. Thank you. If people do want to get a hold of you, again, that's part of your job. Send you an email, give you a call.
Yeah, thank you so much for sending in questions. And I really enjoy this part of the job, not just because I like hanging out with John in this beautiful studio, but I really enjoy talking with people that I work for. So a reminder, I work for you. So if you have any questions in the future, just send me an email, give my office a phone call, send us a letter. We'll be happy to answer them as best that we can.